Hey guys, it's the 24th day. That means we're reading Hebrews chapter 11, verses 30 through 40. In this section, finishing up chapter 11, I kind of entitled it The Faith of the Israelites. We've been looking at what faith is and what it's looked like for many people. But today we're kind of looking at a lot of Israelites, but even through that, we're looking at ourselves. And so starting in verse 30, we notice the words that we've seen for a lot of times now the last couple of nights. By faith, right? By faith. Their faith of a radical faith is producing radical obedience, right? So their faith, the walls of Jericho fell. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish. And then by faith, we see it talks about Gideon and Barak and Samson and Japheth and David and Samuel and the prophets. And all these people, you think about the stories, right? You think about, if you go back and look at verse 29, it was started with Moses walking through the Red Sea on dry ground by faith. The Jericho, instead of storming the walls, instead of climbing over them, they walked around them. That was so weird, but they had faith in something bigger, which produced radical obedience. Rahab, who has two visitors that come, and she should have turned them in, but she listened to a God. She had a faith in a bigger God that produced radical obedience. We see Gideon. If you know the story of Gideon, he was basically a general, and he comes and he has 30,000 men to fight, and God keeps whittling them down until he only has 300 men to fight, and they destroy everybody because God was bigger, right? You have Barak, who was a general under Deborah. You have Samson, who defeated the Philistines alone. You have Japheth, who was a great warrior. You had David, a little shepherd boy, becomes God's king, in which the Messiah would come from. You have Samuel and all the prophets that were just normal men, not articulate men, not great preachers, not extraordinary holy men, but men that God used to tell his message. And we can see through faith, all these men, all these people, these men and women through faith, they did things. And you see the list there in verse 33, that by faith they conquered kingdoms, they enforced justice, they obtained promises, they stopped the mouth of lions, they quenched the power of fire, they escaped the edge of sword, they were made strong out of their weakness, they became mighty in war, they put foreign armies to flight. People were resurrected. We see all of these great things because of their faith. And one of the takeaways from today is faith equals mighty deeds. If we have faith, God will do mighty things with us. But at verse kind of the middle of 35, it changes. It goes through this huge list of all these things that through faith were great. But then at 35, it says that some were tortured, and then others suffered mocking and flogging and chains and imprisonment. Some were stoned. Isaiah was sawn in two. They were killed with the sword. They were in skins of sheep and goats, which means they were poor. They had no money. They were destitute. They were afflicted. They were mistreated. They were looked at as not worthy. They were wandering the deserts, living in dens and caves. And through all of these, though they were commended for their faith, they did not receive what was promised. So we see at the beginning all of these mighty deeds that faith produces, but faith alone does not just produce mighty deeds. Faith also produces enduring suffering. You cannot have faith and not suffer. They come hand in hand. If we're going to stand strong for God, like we talked about yesterday morning, if we're going to call God Abba Father, then Satan is coming after us. He's coming against us. This world is against us. And because of this, we see, so faith does produce great things, but it also does produce suffering. And notice when it says that they commended their faith, that even though they were doing great, their faith was good. Notice what happens. They did not receive the promise. That doesn't mean that God didn't give them their promise. What it means is that they were living for a faith for a Messiah, for Jesus to come, but Jesus never came in their time. They never saw their faith live all the way out into its fullness, but they still had faith. But notice in verse 40, it says, since God had provided something better for us, because we're on this side of the cross. We know Jesus. We can read his word, and we have the Holy Spirit inside of us if you're a believer. And then we can know Jesus. But notice what it says, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. Even us as Christians on this side of the cross, with knowing what faith is, producing in mighty deeds, and having suffering, we're not going to live our best life on this earth. God's never promised our best life on this earth. This is not health and wealth. This is the complete opposite, right? This is the idea of saying if God is your father, if heaven is your home, we're exiles. Exactly what we've been talking about in 1 Peter. And because of that, when things don't go right, when things don't go the way that we expect, that doesn't mean that God's not in control. It actually means that we might be living right. We might have the right faith. We might be in the right place. Because yes, faith does produce mighty deeds, but it also produces suffering. And it will always and will continue to produce suffering until we die or until Jesus calls us home. And so because of that, that's just something that we've got to understand. It's something that some of the Israelites understood, some of the Gentiles understood, that through faith, they kept strong and they never saw the end. And for us, we might continue in the faith and we might keep strong, but we might die before Jesus comes back. But no matter what, God is on the throne. And our inheritance is already marked with our name, guarded by him, and we will be with him soon enough at home in heaven with him. That's what faith is for. And so as we move into tomorrow's reading, into chapter 12, at looking really what faith looks like on this earth, that's the reality that you need to remember. Faith is the expressing and seeing God move in mighty ways. But faith at times is also enduring suffering. And there's always times, there's great things and there's bad things, but we are always called to keep faith in who God is. Thanks, guys. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope this makes sense. We got less than a week left, and I am so excited that we're doing this together. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.